Hey y'all.
Hey.
How you doing?
Good.
What a beautiful room. I'm so excited. No, really. What a beautiful room. I'm so excited to be here. I'm fresh off a plane, so this is quite off the cuff, and I will do my best to appropriately represent. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrea Assaf. I'm the artistic director of Art to Action, Inc., which is based in Tampa, Florida. And I'm Lebanese American, third generation. And we all come to this, I feel like this is a moment, I feel like we're in a delta right now, right? This is a moment of many streams, many rivers conjoining, and converging, convening, yes, thank you. And so I'm gonna talk about a little bit of some of those other streams. Perhaps the main one, the largest body of water leading us here is what Tiranj began with. But also, so TCG, Theater Communications Group, has had over the last several years an initiative under the framing of EDI, or Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I want to give props to TCG for really listening to artists of color in the field many years ago that had a lot of feedback about how we were feeling served or not served well enough. And the leaders, the leadership in TCG that really took on this initiative to make substantive change in the organization in a way that would impact our experience going. So if you haven't been to a TCG conference, or you haven't been in many years, go back or try it out, because it feels quite different now. And that's partly due to this cohort work that TCG has been doing, led primarily by Emilia Cachapiro and Elena Chang. And so what's unique this year is that they're in the fourth cohort. And they decided to make the fourth cohort focus specifically on theaters of color, and particularly networks of color within the theater community. Because some feedback that was received earlier on was that from artists of color who were participating was that this feels like white America is still the center of the conversation. Yeah? And how do we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and even go further and talk about justice in a way that doesn't center the historical center, right? That is truly as complex as we all are, and as our field is today, right? So they made this commitment to bring together theaters of color and networks of color that serve theater artists. Also, multiple streams leading to a delta, yes. I want to lift up the work of Leslie Ishii and East West Players and the Consortium of Asian American Theaters and Artists that also was convening networks of color in 2016 and doing that work prior, to start to talk about how could the Latinx Theater Commons and the multiple Black theater networks that are in the field, and the Consortium of Asian American Theaters and Artists, which is relatively new, and trying to understand how to be inclusive of what we deal with calling the Middle East. Understanding that a large part of it is Southwestern Asia, yes, and also North Africa and all of our complexities, right? Leslie Ishii was organizing that work under the auspices of ACADA convening in 2016. TCG was working on Cohort 4 and developing that, and the LARC and Golden Thread and Silk Road and all these folks were working on figuring out how to convene us together. And these multiple streams have led us to this moment. And I also want to make sure that we acknowledge and lift up other organizations that aren't necessarily theater organizations, but that have had a big impact in our ability to come together. And so I want to name MISNA and RAWI, the Writers Network, and the Arab American National Museum, and their convening, currently called MOVE, And make sure that we recognize that, you know, all these things bubbling in all these places in the 21st century are leading us to having greater collective voice and power and input and vision, yes? And that we cannot do that in isolation. We are in a historical moment in which we must, I feel, and like Taranj said, talk to me later if you don't agree, but I feel we must embrace our status as a community of color in the United States. Now, I know that's complex for us in the way that it's complex for the Latinx community, right? Because many of us pass as white, many of us live our daily lives as white, and many of us can't pass and can't live that way, right? And yet we're all trying to share our cultural and artistic experiences within this highly racialized society that we live in called the United States of America, which is itself a problematic term, but that's another conversation. So if we are trying to build voice and representation and collective power around cultural representation and around, you know, the direction that this country is going in and who we are and what we do in the world, that we're all a part of if we live here. Like it or not, we're all a part of what the United States is doing in the world, yeah? Mm-hmm. That's a lot to reconcile for a lot of us, right? Mm-hmm. But we can't do it alone. As complex as our communities are and hard as it is for us to get on the same page and to get together about who we are and what the Middle East is and where we fit in it and what it means to be that in this country, in this context, we are doing that alongside communities of color that have been in this conversation and leading this conversation and doing this work and fighting this fight for a very, very long time. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? We can learn from each other. We can learn from the Latinx Theater Commons. We can learn from the Black Theater Networks. We can learn from the struggles for civil rights in the South. I was born in Virginia. I live currently in Florida. I've lived throughout my life south of the Mason-Dixon line at different times. And it is different. It is a thing. And it is extremely underrepresented. The US and artists in the South continue to be extremely underrepresented, which led to the creation of an organization called Alternate Roots, which I'm a part of, which is a tremendous resource for us about how to organize, how to collaborate with organizers, about how to have these difficult conversations about race and equality and justice as we're trying to do our artistic and cultural work, yeah? It's a lot. All of that is a lot. But that's our charge. And so, so I want to give thanks to and lift up all the other folks who've been out there in the field doing this work and paving the way and creating models, which we're going to talk more about tomorrow. And I also want to acknowledge that we're not the only ones trying to figure out how to do this now. That Native American theater artists, First Nations, First Peoples artists, and Indigenous artists in this country are in a similar place as Middle Eastern communities in terms of there is no infrastructure. There is no national network for contemporary artists in theater, right, for them. And so they're also in this kind of early stage. How do we get together all of our nations that haven't always been friends, let's be honest, right? All of our communities that don't always get along. All of our histories that have such complex and different relationships to the United States, national government, yeah? And how do we build solidarity without erasing any of that? But really creating a vision for the future, as Taranj was saying. So I wanted to plant those seeds and offer some of those questions and offer to you that we'll continue to explore them and unpack them and talk more about coalition building tomorrow. And it is a tremendous, really tremendous honor for me personally to be here with all of you as colleagues. And I'm so excited for what it is that we're going to create together. Thank you.